There is an uncomfortable truth about modern football, and nowhere is it more visible than in the Premier League. Despite being the richest, most watched, and most tactically resourced league in the world, the Premier League is quietly suffering from a tactical homogenization problem. A league that once prided itself on stylistic clashes and ideological variety now increasingly feels like the same game being replayed over and over again, just with different kits and different faces. What makes this particularly ironic is that football has never had more tactical tools available. Managers today have access to an enormous library of formations and structural ideas, ranging from back threes and back fives to narrow diamonds, box midfields, asymmetrical shapes, and even hybrid systems that shift depending on phase of play. You can play with one striker, two strikers, or no striker at all. You can overload the center, stretch the pitch vertically, compress it horizontally, or deliberately concede certain zones to trap opponents elsewhere. And yet, despite all of that theoretical freedom, the Premier League has settled into an overwhelmingly narrow, tactical comfort zone. Week after week, we see the same two formations dominate the league, the 4-2-3-1 and the 4-3-3. These shapes are not inherently bad, and they certainly have their merits, but the issue is not their existence. The issue is their near-total monopoly over the tactical landscape. If you look at what is traditionally referred to as the Big Six, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. Arsenal typically operate in a 4-3-3 formation structure. Chelsea also default to a 4-2-3-1. Liverpool spend the majority of their time in the same shape. Manchester City lean toward a 4-3-3, albeit with positional rotations layered on top. Manchester United, after briefly experimenting with a 3-4-3 under Ruben Amorim, have reverted back to a 4-2-3-1 following his dismissal. Tottenham Hotspur also operate within the same structural framework. Even when you expand the scope beyond the traditional elite, the picture barely changes. Aston Villa, currently performing at a high level, use a 4-2-3-1 with minor adjustments that occasionally resemble a 4-4-1-1 when their wide players drop deeper. Brentford rely on a 4-2-3-1. Newcastle United deploys a 4-3-3 structure. This is not coincidence. The 4-2-3-1 has become the league's safety blanket because it offers balance without demanding ideological commitment. It gives you defensive security with two deeper midfielders, width through wingers, a clear focal point up front, and a number 10 who can theoretically link everything together. The 4-3-3 offers similar comfort, with the added benefit of midfield control and flexible defensive transitions into a 4-1-4-1 or 4-5-1. From a risk management perspective, these systems make perfect sense. But football is not just a risk management exercise, and this is where the problem begins. Because when almost everyone uses the same base structure, the matches themselves start to blur together. Attacking patterns become predictable. Build-up structures are familiar. Pressing triggers are rehearsed not just by the team executing them, but by every opponent who has faced the same shape 5 times already that month. The overwhelming majority of attacking play is now funneled toward the wings. Inverted wingers receive the ball, isolate their fullback, and engage in repeated 1-versus-1 duels. Fullbacks overlap or underlap. Crosses are fired across the 6-yard box. Cutbacks are recycled toward the penalty spot. Then the play resets and the sequence repeats. It is functional, but it is also deeply one-dimensional. What is missing is genuine structural variation. Very few teams commit to a true two-striker system that fundamentally changes defensive reference points. The classic partnerships that force centre-backs into constant decision-making simply do not exist anymore. The false nine, once a tool for destabilizing defensive blocks and overloading midfield zones, has largely disappeared in favor of fixed reference point forwards. Central overloads are often talked about, but rarely sustained. Possession is recycled wide far more often than it is intentionally forced through the middle. Perhaps most concerning of all is the erosion of team identity. There was a time when you could recognize a team's philosophy within minutes of watching them play. There were sides built around defensive superiority and back-three structures, such as Chelsea during their most dominant periods. There were hyper-aggressive pressing teams, like Liverpool at the peak of their gegenpressing era, using fluid false nines to destabilize opponents. There were possession monopolists, such as Manchester City, who slowed games down to a suffocating crawl. There were even throwback moments, like Newcastle United deploying a genuine two-striker partnership with Demba Ba and Papis Cisse. Those identities mattered. They created contrast. They created tactical tension. They forced adaptation. Now, many of those same clubs operate within remarkably similar frameworks, differentiated more by personnel quality than by philosophical intent. The Premier League has become tactically efficient, but also tactically conservative. And in that conservatism, something vital has been lost. When everyone plays the same way, football stops feeling like a contest of ideas and starts feeling like a test of execution alone. The league may still be intense, athletic, and commercially dominant, but tactically, it risks becoming predictable. And for a competition that sells itself on being the pinnacle of the sport, that should be a far bigger concern than most are willing to admit.